Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are doing really well today. We have got a video talking about lesson planning. I'm going to be sharing with you guys some of my best pieces of advice in terms of how you can get better at planning lessons as a teacher. Now, one little disclaimer is obviously if you are a PGC and if you are an NQT, your lesson planning is still at the early stages, and so I'm hoping that these pieces of advice are going to be really useful for you, but please bear in mind that these things are going to take some time to get better at, and no one is amazing and perfect and always on lesson planning in terms of delivering outstanding lessons every single time. So just be kind and be gentle with yourself and be patient that your lesson planning is going to get better over time. Now, if you want to see a few more videos about lesson planning, I'm going to link them up here in the cards above, so make sure to check those out. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So my first piece of advice is to not reinvent the wheel. We can feel really frustrated sometimes with lesson planning, that we have this need to lesson plan from scratch so that it is authentically our lesson. But the truth is we are going to be delivering dozens of lessons over, the next few weeks. And I think it's really important to be mindful to not plan every single lesson from scratch, just so that you feel like it is your lesson. So by all means, plan from scratch when you need to. And if it's a lesson that you are really keen to perfect and to plan a lesson to an extent that you're really proud, and then you can use that lesson resource in the future. But I think avoid where possible to plan from scratch if you know that there have been lesson resources that have been tried and tested and shared with lots of different members of staff that you can easily use and then tweak to use yourself. So for example, you can access a ton of lesson resources on TES. You can favorite your favorite accounts that you have tried some of their lesson resources and you trust them as teachers who are planning those lessons, and then you can get notifications of when they upload new ones, and you can get those resources whether for free or whether you want to pay a small fee. But you can also access the teacher grammars and teachers over on Twitter who share resources for free, and some of them are incredible. So definitely have a little bit of a sit down and search the wide web for these resources. And then leading on to my tip number 2 is to make sure that you are organizing these resources to the best of your abilities. Now, organizing these resources so that you are able to access them in the future and for easier use is such an important part of lesson planning that I don't think people talk a lot about. So if you are currently a teacher, or if you are training to be a teacher, I would urge you to maybe think about how you are organizing those lessons. There are a few ways you can do it, and that I have personally tried. I'd be really interested in knowing what you have tried, so let me know in the comments section down below. But one of the key things you can do is you can organize the lesson resources by topic, so that whenever you're teaching a topic, you can then access that folder for that topic and then see the lesson resources that you have created in the past or that you have found in the past, and then you can tweak those that are already there. The second way you can do it is by year group. So if you have an associated memory of teaching a specific lesson to a specific class, you can then organize it that way. So you can vary between these two ways of organizing. There might be other ways, so definitely explore those and have a go. But I think it's super useful to have a go at organizing your resources so that they are so much easier to access in the future. And on that note, I also find it really useful to use the notes section on PowerPoint or on Google Slides. Of course, you can be organizing these on a desktop, or you can be organizing them on a drive so that you can access them from wherever you are. So I think it's just really important to make sure that you're maximizing on the tool that you're using. And I find that the notes section is quite useful for me to get prompts of what I was thinking in terms of the questioning or the structure of the lesson. And sometimes I also include a slide right at the beginning of my resource, just detailing exactly what I wanted to do with that lesson. My tip number 3 is to observe lessons as much as possible. I have made a video all about lesson observations and how to get the most out of them, so I'll link them up in the cards above. But it's really important to get some fresh ideas and to collaborate with people who teach other subjects, people who are within your subject department. And I think when you observe other people teach, you get inspiration, you get ideas, whether that has been from things that they have done or things that you feel like were missing from the lesson, because it gives you an opportunity to reflect. And a lot of people feel really weird about lesson observations because they feel like they're being watched, and it feels like a little bit like you're imposing on someone else. But try to start off by observing some of your friends, so teachers who you've got a really positive and good relationship with, and then you can build that up to other members of staff. And always remember that you can rely on your senior team, so people who should be there really to improve your teaching and learning practice. And of course, lesson observations do not need to be an entire lesson. You can pop in for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes. You could pop in at the start of the lesson, halfway through a lesson, at the end of a lesson. You could pop in, once a week to a Year 9 class, and then the next week you could pop into a Key Stage 5 lesson. So I think mixing things up is always such a great way, because then you don't feel bored and neither does the person. But then also you can do a bit of a swapsies. So if you observe someone teach a specific class, you can then say, why don't you come and see me teach that same class or a different class, and then you can collaborate and share some ideas as well. My fourth tip is to actually plan a sequence of lessons. Now, there is something called the backwards planning model, which I'm a massive fan of. And essentially what this is talking about is where you have the learning objectives and outcomes in mind, and then you're backtracking your steps in terms of what are the things that you need to do as a teacher and that your students need to do in order to meet those learning objectives and outcomes. I think this is super important and it's so powerful, because if you plan lesson by lesson, then you're missing the bigger picture and you're missing that journey and the connection between lessons. So one of my favorite things to do when I'm lesson planning is thinking about my medium-term plan and actually planning a sequence of lessons in bulk. And this is where I like to sit down for 2-3 hours and plan those lessons. So then I've got 2 weeks worth of lessons prepared. What I will then do with all of those lessons is actually tweak them. So after I've taught a lesson, for example, to a Year 10 class from one of these, bulk lesson planning times that I've had, where I've probably prepped 4 or 5 lessons in a sequence. After I taught that first lesson, if there's anything I need to change to the second and to the third lesson, I'll just go ahead and make those tweaks there and then. But I will never make those tweaks and then save over the first resource that I created. I always save a copy into a separate folder, so then I can still use that main resource that I've created for another class, and then that class might experience a different journey through those lesson plans. And I think that's a really great way of doing it, and it's super effective, because then you're not sitting down for each single lesson and you're actually planning in bulk, which can be very, very effective. And of course, it also means that if you are doing this bulk planning, you can then allow your students to act on the feedback, because then you are using the assessment for learning, opportunities that you've built in your lessons to then tweak future lessons in response to the needs of your students. My fifth tip is to always reflect and to ask for feedback when there are opportunities for feedback to be given to you. So as teachers, we rarely really get the opportunity to reflect because we're really short on time. But I think it's such a powerful thing that you can be doing, and try to do it very often. At the end of every single lesson, just take a few seconds to think, how did that go? What would I change next time? What were some successes and what were some fails? And I think if you get into the habit of always thinking, the answer to 2 or 4 of those questions, you are going to get much better at lesson planning. And then next time you're sat down and you're prepping a lesson, you can then reflect back, hang on, what did I do with that class? What was really successful with that other year group? How can I incorporate that into this lesson plan? And in terms of seeking feedback, if you tie that in with the lesson observations, if you're popping into other people's lessons, get them to come into yours. Have it a two-way conversation. And if they are popping into your lesson, be proactive in seeking feedback. That's the whole point of lesson observations. And try not to shy away from constructive feedback. Ask those really tough questions. Ask, what can I do to improve? What went wrong? What are the things that you think were not very effective? And by having those really honest conversations while still maintaining some humility, I think it's really, such a stepping stone in getting better at lesson planning. Number 6 is to get to know your teaching style. As teachers, we all have our own quirks and our own qualities that make us a teacher. We have things that are unique to us. Some teachers are really, really advocates of group work. Some teachers much prefer modeling and getting students to then build their independence. Other teachers really prefer worksheets and practice questions. other teachers prefer dialogue and discussions. I think it's really important that you know what your default is, so that when you are lesson planning, you can really maximize on that, because that is your authentic self. That is what feels comfortable to you, and that's how you deliver outstanding lessons. But then also it's a great opportunity to think, how do I now stretch that, and how do I get out of my comfort zone to improve my lesson planning? It also means that if you know what is comfortable to you and where your comfort zone is, you can then prep lessons much quicker in that style. So when you're really short on time, or when you're stuck creatively, you can default to that, plan a lesson in that way, leave it, come back to it and perfect it. And I think it's so great to know that, and that is also encouraged by having this ongoing reflection, because then when you are stuck, when you are doubtful of your own abilities as a teacher, which we always have those doubts, I think it's really great that you have something to fall back on that lifts your spirits, that boosts your confidence, and then you're able to lesson plan a bit more creatively next time. And my last tip, so tip number 7, is to always keep your CPD going. I think it's really important to stay fresh, to attend lots of online CPD sessions, to continue that professional journey. Don't think that just because your teacher training has finished, that that's the end of what you can learn as a teacher. I think it's really important to learn from your peers, from your colleagues, from other people in other schools, from online tools and resources. So definitely stay in touch and stay open to ideas, and try to attend some seminars, some conferences, some online tools and resources, and get some books, and just keep that passion and keep that drive going, because that's what's going to ignite this little fire in you to get better at your job. And of course, the CPD doesn't need to take hours. It can be small little bursts of information. It can just be looking on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. This, for example, can be a little bit of CPD. So I think it's just about taking the time and the effort to spend 5-10 minutes, or to spend half an hour, or to spend an hour, and to also approach existing CPD that your school is offering with a positive mindset. And there we go, those are 7 tips in terms of my advice to you on how you can get better at lesson planning. If you've got any others, I would love to hear them, so leave them in the comment section down below. But that is it for today's video. Have a lovely afternoon, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!